So what I'm demonstrating here is my network visualization for the Diablo 3 ladder. And this network is of the various equipable items that characters can use. So at the top here, we have the graph network, which encodes the items, which are the nodes, and the frequency with which items are equipped together is demonstrated by the edges. So these lines here, the thicker the line, the more frequently associated these items are to each other. And the items themselves, the nodes, the size of the nodes dictates how frequently that item appears in the total data set. So for instance, the item here, Cage of the Hellborn, appears less frequently than the convocation of the elements. And then below the network, we have a correlation matrix, which gives us a breakdown of the network above, how frequently two items are seen together. So it's just another way of looking at the relationships in the network shown in the network diagram, because as you can see, the network diagram is very busy with all these lines, all the edges going on. And while we're speaking about the edges, we'll go on to the filtering options on the side here. So here's an option to display the network edges. So we could regenerate this graph without the edges, and then what we'll get is the nodes appearing as blobs floating in free space, which I guess is an interesting way of viewing the information, but perhaps not really helpful, because we know we lose the detail about how the strength of the relationships, the weight of the edges. And then with that in mind, I've got an option here to normalize the network edges to Quantile. So instead of showing the individual weights, because it gets a bit difficult to notice this, the difference between a relationship that has a weight of 50, say, versus 60, I've gone and binned the relationships into Quantile. So we've got the really thin edges, the slightly larger edges, the bigger edges, and then the biggest edges over here. So it's a bit easier to understand. And what we can also do is we can bring it down to just for Crusaders, because that's the class I play, so that's the one I'm probably the most interested in. And I can also adjust the weight cutoff, so this will cut off based on the thickness of the edges. So I only want to see the top 70%, so everything that's below 30% is going to get taken off. And then as for the size cutoff, this is now referring to the how many times an item appears in the total data sets. That's the size of the node. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to refresh the network. The refreshing does take a while. In retrospect, I probably could have done a lot more pre-processing up front. I had to melt and I guess pivot the data, and the size of the data set poses a problem that, and recursion in R seems to be not the fastest operation. So what do we have here? Now we've got this regenerated graph for Crusaders. And what we can see is that the items, the Traveler's Pledge, the Burden of the Evoker, and the Compass Rose are together in a community. And whereas these other items, the Oryx Crown, Convocation of Elements, Balth the Trove, Litany of the Undaunted, Weight of the Host, Queller Curse, and the Heart of Iron are more frequently used together, based on the filtering that we've applied. And what I can do is I can click on an individual item, say the Oryx Crown, and you'll see the lookup has now been populated with that. And I'm going to readjust these values. Okay. And now I'm going to regenerate the network. And it's going to be focusing on the item, the Oryx Crown. So what it's going to be looking for is items that have a relation either directly to your Oryx Crown, or items that have a relationship to an item that has a relationship to the Oryx Crown, so second degree relationships. And here we go. And because we focused this node, what I've done is I've gone and highlighted the Oryx Crown in its own community. and I guess as well as I've overemphasized the size of it, just so that it sticks out, so we know that we're focusing this graph. And now we have a graph that's pretty cluttered. So what we could do is we could untick that and regenerate the graph. But I'm not going to. I'll do that. And while it's busy working on that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the correlation matrix, and let's see. Let's click on this over here, because what happens when we click on an item in the correlation matrix is that it's going to go to a community-run database and give me a display of those two items, so I can see more information about the items and perhaps infer why they are commonly used together. I would have used the developer's website for fetching the item information. However, they have set up their website so I can't embed the website in the iframe, which is what I'm using to show it down here. So I clicked on the Hellfire Amulet and the Nemesis Braces. And the Hellfire Amulet gained the effect of a random passive skill of your class type. So that would be why it's such a popular item, because it essentially allows the player to get an additional passive skill, adds additional functionality to the class. And the Nemesis Braces, shrines will spawn an enemy champion. So enemy champions are enemies that tend to drop better than average loot. So this increases the frequency in which you encounter these creatures. So this is why players will probably equip this item, because if they're looking to get better items, they'll want to attack more enemy champions, and so this generates more enemy champions. So therefore the loop continues. So I hope this has given you a overview of the functionality I had developed with using networkd3. There isn't an awful lot of documentation for this library. It does seem to be fairly new. And if I was to do this again, I would probably develop it as a native D3 visualization and use JavaScript for the design and pre-processing where possible, and probably do a lot more upfront pre-processing than trying to do everything programmatically at runtime. Thanks for your attention and allowing me to do this. I've enjoyed the module very much, and I wish you the best of luck in future runnings of this course. Cheers.